if you had, imagine you've got unlimited time and an unlimited amount of money, and the idea of learning more about magic appeals to you. There's something tantalizing about magic, isn't there, and about magicians, and sometimes we think it's just the child in us, perhaps, who's intrigued by the magician. But there's often something more that's calling to us. So imagine you were in that lucky position, and you turned to somebody who really knew their stuff, and you said, what part of the world should I travel to? Where should I go? And you might think that perhaps you'd be sent off to Paris to research the archives of the Bibliothèque Nationale, or you'd be sent to Rome, perhaps, to look in the vaults of the Vatican Library, all the sort of prohibited documents and so on, or perhaps to Egypt, perhaps to who knows where. But the reality is the best place for you to go would be England, because through some quirk of fate or history, or perhaps from the very rational explanation that the English language has come to dominate the world, and because the British Empire was so large, and because English scholars and eccentrics were interested in these subjects, the reality is that England is the greatest repository of magical law. It offers the greatest repository of magical law and practice in the whole world. And in fact, England has been responsible for at least 7 kinds of magic that now dominate the world of magic. And this isn't to say that all this, of course, is uniquely English, because what's happened is that this material has come from all parts of the world, but it has been transformed and changed in England, and sometimes initiated in England. So this is an extraordinary fact, and I think it's a fact that a lot of people aren't aware of, actually. And so this is the premise that we started working with on our book together, Legend Hegate. We realised that this was something that very few people knew, and as we started to explore it, we started to uncover, if you like, a hidden story of English culture and history. And for those of you who have either been profoundly immersed in magic, in the occult, or know a little bit about it, you'll probably know that there are a number of books and studies about particular kinds of magic. So if you're interested in the Templars, for example, or if you're interested in Freemasonry, if you're interested in Wicca, or you're interested in the Druids, there are plenty of books that deal with those in detail. But there doesn't seem to be a book that covers all of the manifestations of magic through time, and that somehow connects them all together so that one can see them as part of an unfolding story. So that was our aim in writing the book. And so we began at the beginning, in the prehistoric era, and asked ourselves, what really is magic? Because it seems that magic is deeply related to the earth herself. And what I believe is that magic is born out of the relationship between darkness and light. So magic is born out of that sense of wonder and awe. You know, when you're sitting under the night sky and you see the stars twinkling in the darkness. When another magical moment is when your child is born. And so out of the darkness of the womb, this new being emerges. And of course, in springtime, that sense of magic as the first flowers and the leaves come up on trees and so on. So it's this relationship between what is hidden and unknown and what is manifest and known that lies at the heart of magic. And the magician, or the person interested in magic, is somebody who's drawn to an intimate awareness of that, and who even has the hubris or the curiosity to actually hope that they too can participate in that magic. And although there's lots of hubris around in magic, in the history of magic, the reason I'm interested in it is because I believe that actually the curiosity and the creative impulse is the one that really drives it. So the hubris is the neurotic component, if you like, that comes from people's sense of poor sense of self-worth wanting to dominate other people and so on. But really, what's going on, what I believe the impulse to explore magic is coming from, is that knowledge that we too can participate in this process of bringing something out of the unknown into the known. And anyone who's creative knows, has an intimation of this. You know that experience of sort of sitting in front of your computer with a blank page and then starting to write, and then something seems to happen. And sometimes, have you ever had that experience of the commentary on your own process? Say you're writing, and part of you thinking, I didn't know I knew that, or that sounds rather good. You know, say you're writing poetry. Oh, that sounds rather good. Or you're painting, and suddenly something seems to take over and almost guide your hand. And a lot of people even experience it as a kind of energetic flow in their bodies. And so the magician is somebody who says, who notices this and says, well, maybe there's a way that I can work with this to encourage this. And so we start right at the beginning with the caves in the centre of England, the border of Nottinghamshire and Derbyshire, Robin Hood's cave, and the legless ladies of Cresswell Crags. Does anybody know about the legless ladies?
Yeah.
You know? You do?
I grew
yes.
up near there.
Yes. Well, they sort of look like a series of stacked boomerangs, but apparently they're bumped. And they are sort of dancing female figures. And they're legless, not because they drunk too much, but because time has worn away the image from the caves. We're used to those painted cave images from, can I sit on this? Yes, I can. Lascaux and Altamira in Spain, those places that have drier climates, where they've managed to preserve their cave paintings. In Britain, up until quite recently, we thought we didn't have any. But the new techniques of research and so on established that really we did. And these particular caves in the centre of England show these images of the dancing ladies and so on. And you take that image from prehistory, and you take a moment sitting in a cafe in Covent Garden, if you've ever done this, around by Longacre. Have you ever noticed, if you go in the evening about sort of 6 o'clock or something, that there'll be rather a lot of men wearing black suits with little piccolo cases? And they're not musicians from the Royal Opera House, which is around the corner. They're actually Freemasons who are waiting to do their ceremonies in Freemasons' Hall, that great wedge-shaped building that they use in Spooks as the headquarters of MI5, but is in fact the headquarters of the Grand Lodge. They go in there and they enact their ceremonies in those little piccolo cases, or their aprons, and sometimes their wands. And so you get this extraordinary business. One of the earliest religious sites in the world is actually outside of England, in Wales, in the Havant Caves, where there are mammoth tusks carved as wands and then snapped over the figure of the Red Lady of Haviland, which we've now discovered was not a lady, it was a man who was covered with red ochre, and the wand snapped to show that his life force has been spent. So these wands, this powerful symbol of magical power, of life force, they're being used today in Covent Garden, they're being used in caves. The same idea in the Freemasonic initiation, you're led in, you're blindfolded, led into the darkness, and at a certain point, the blindfold is taken off, and you are shown the symbols of the craft. The same idea, being in the cave, being initiated, coming out into the light of the dawn, perhaps, coming out in the light of the solstice dawn, perhaps. This basic idea of being born out of darkness, which is, of course, reflected in the physiological process of being born. It's what we all go through bodily. And then in the magical way, you go through it at a symbolic and a spiritual way.